Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscription Scaled. I'm your host, Nick Frederick. With me today is Ben Tuttle, who is the CTO of Arturo. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we were just talking a second ago about what Arturo does, and I don't think it's a business model that a lot of people know about. So why don't we start there? Tell us what Arturo is at the high level, and what your role is.
Right on. So we are insurance focused. We actually came out of we were a corporate startup that came out of an insurance company, American Family, and they started looking at the question of could they use remotely sensed imagery from satellites, from airplanes, to improve the data points that go into their risk decisions and their policy underwriting and their responses to claims and renewals. And they inevitably found out that yes, you can. And they said, this is great, but let's spin this out and make it a thing. It'll have far more success as its own company that can sell across the whole market than tucked away here in the basement of AmFam somewhere. So in 2019, they spun us out and we started as our own company. And now we use multiple aerial and satellite providers to bring data together. And we use machine learning models and computer vision to analyze that imagery in a matter of seconds and be able to bring back, in the current situation, upwards of 40 characteristics about a property that help to determine risk, whether or not things have changed post a disaster that are interesting. We're doing some interesting work with hail right now, and to allow people to quickly make decisions. So when you're getting ready to underwrite a new home, do you know everything you need to know about that home? Does it have a pool or does it not? What is the roof material? What is the condition of the roof, and how long might it be before that roof needs to be replaced? Right, as opposed to the previous methods of doing this involved shipping this off to a person. 24 hours later, they would generate a report and send you back a PDF that talks about the property based on having manually inspected all of this imagery. And then, you paid a pretty hefty sum for that. Whereas now we can do it much cheaper and in almost real time, to the point that, we even work with some people who use us in their online point of quote services, so that they can get new information in and present that to a user as they are exploring getting a quote from an insurance company for a property.
So that level of automation must require a whole lot of background processing that's happened automatically. And I assume you guys are using a lot of AI for that.
Yes. So we have a whole series of internal machine learning models and computer vision models that we use to pull this all together. We've been orchestrating all of that on AWS and Kubernetes. And then we have also our whole own internal pipeline of how we do labeling, training, and develop and refine new and existing models to get that out. Because it turns out you've got to constantly be looking at these things, whether it's because you switched regions when we expanded into Australia. That required us to retrain a ton of models from the US, because it turns out that in Australia they have water tanks on some of their properties that look a lot like air conditioning units in the US. And the Australian insurers were all wondering why we were telling them there were so many air conditioners around. Right, so you've got to constantly be looking at that. So we built our whole own internal team that does data quality and labeling and training and works with our machine learning engineers to make sure that, we're getting the best core data, because that's the foundation of all of this, crap in, crap out. So we focus very heavily on that and are constantly refining those things, constantly labeling, constantly looking for edge cases. And then as we continue to try and expand out around the globe, making sure that whether it's a new camera that we're working with or a new geographic region, that we're getting enough samples in to avoid any, geographic bias or bias across different camera sensors.
And then as the CTO, I assume your responsibility is to oversee all of that technology and how you guys are utilizing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a big team that's broken down across everything from our front end applications to that platform I talked about that allows us to deliver from start to finish, and then our AI and ML teams that are constantly building and playing with exciting new data sources that we get access to and seeing how we can use that to further create value for our customers.
Yeah, so you guys are obviously churning through a tremendous amount of data. as a startup from 2019, and you already mentioned AWS. Are you guys 100% cloud native?
Yes, and
Okay.
totally remote after COVID.
Yep.
That's how we're doing it.
Yeah, so I tell a similar story. We started our business, our building our platforms just a few years ago too. And I tell people all the time, if we had started our business even a few years earlier than that, the way it looks and how we would have built it would have been drastically different from what it is now, just because of, what was available in 2018, 2019. Do you feel the same way? Would you guys have taken a different approach previously?
Yeah, very possibly, right? The timing was good. There were a number of providers. We're also in like, sort of a renaissance of the geospatial industry at the moment, where there's a lot of new technology coming to bear, not just on the analytics side, but also on the data collection side, which has just offered us a lot of cool opportunities to start exploring data sources that answer questions nobody could answer before at this scale. And yeah, also to bring this level of automation, at a cost that, I think that's another big part of it. We could do some of this automation years ago, but it was wildly more expensive than it is now. So
Right.
really being able
Right.
to get those prices down is a key piece.
Yeah, just the speed to market there too, right? Even on top of the cost, being able to like spin up services instantly rather than,
Right.
hey, we need to go buy another server, right? Even
Yeah.
if it was, even if you're using EC2 and things like that, it would have been spinning up servers and installing OSs, and now with containers and Lambdas, that looks dramatically different.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting ride, and wildly different. The first system I built like this was all on in-house hardware back in the '90s, and big racks of Dell servers that cost a fortune, and
Mm-hmm.
we could never grow big enough because our budget was limited. Working at the group in the government and universities I was working with, and none of those hindrances are there for us anymore. We go up when we need to, we go down when we need to,
Hmm.
and we go where we need to. Right? It's easy
Yeah.
as we've
Yeah.
expanded into Australia to move infrastructure into Australia so that it's
Right.
locally placed with our customers there.
Button clicks now. It's hard to convey to people who don't live this like how different it is now.
Yeah. Yes. I used to
You said
manage
that.
those data centers. It was a pain.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't manage them, but I was heavily involved at a prior company with multiple data centers, and yeah, it was just everything took dramatically longer and was dramatically more expensive, not just from the infrastructure perspective, but the people you needed to manage it
Oh,
too. Yeah, hiring network engineers and DBAs and platform engineers. It was just that was just to be able to then load an application on top of it, right?
yep.
Um, so
Crazy.
different now. Well, you said that you're a corporate startup from within American General. I'm curious because I talk to a lot of founders who are, starting from ground zero, right? And my company as well, we're a startup out of a larger consulting firm, and I know there's a lot of differences there. So were you an employee of Amgen before coming over to Arturo? Is that, and did you bring some people with you, or kind of talk us through that process? Because I
Yes.
think it's fascinating.
It is. It provides all sorts of differences, right? And
Hmm.
on top of that, right, we inherited some contracts and a business plan and
Okay.
some technology and a way of doing things. And as we've grown, we've had to grow from that rather than just starting from scratch, which is interesting. But yeah, so when American Family decided to spin this out in 2018, the first thing they did was bring in a CEO and create a C corp in Delaware, like everybody does. And a few months after that, as they were getting their legs under them, the CEO and I are friends and have worked together in a number of capacities in the past. And he reached out and said, "Hey, I need somebody to do this." And I always told you that this is what I wanted to do, and it was going to be exciting. And I came out to look at it, and it took me tens of minutes to figure out that what they had put together was the top 10% cream of the crop of what's happening in this space. And so it was a no-brainer to say, yes, count me in, let's go do this. So I came in, and so I was officially hired by the new corporation. And then we officially, by spring of 2019, had fully spun out from American Family as our own entity with all the data and IP licensed over to us and ready to go, and started out on our Series A funding round.
Got after it real fast.
Yes.
Yeah. Would I know you said you came in right as it became its own company, but how was that separation? I mean, you said there's some processes and contracts that you brought with you, but was it a good, hey guys, here, go do your thing now, or did you find people still kind of holding on? Like, I'm curious what that was like.
Yeah, it went pretty well for us. In the early days when we first got there, before the spin out was totally complete in the spring of 19, American Family was still helping pay some of our bills with seed funding. They still to this day have a seat on our board, and at the time had a seat on our board, and were involved in that. And they had come up with a great business plan that we were able to get out the door with and get that Series A round done. And we had their backing all the way along the way to make that happen. But then once that happened, they took a big step back, and we have now grown the company of a number of other directions, where we've just seen business opportunities that they weren't seeing when they were looking at it only internally. So scaling that out, changing some of the underlying technology, the normal stuff you see with going from R&D to enterprise of having to put in more robustness and tracking and security, and things like that. Although we did have a decent amount of security already because American Family likes to keep their things secure too. So that was a nice touch to not have to worry about.
Hmm.
And yeah, now I'd say we've grown the business pretty significantly. We've branched out into a number of new areas. We've got more in mind going into next year, branching out from residential property and casualty insurance to commercial, doing more work looking at natural catastrophe, both pre and post event work that we can do to help insurance companies better respond to those events and make their customers' lives better, as well as to be more in tune with what events and risks are possibly coming down the road so they can be prepared for that. And do things like work with their customers to, one of the things we see is roof tree overlap. So turns out, roofs are a big deal in insurance. If they fail, it's expensive. Other bad things happen to the house. And so having trees growing over the roof is a risk because a storm comes through, it knocks branches down, they damage the roof. So now we have customers who are able to take that and reach out to a customer and say, hey, maybe you'd be willing to cut those trees back if we give you a discount on your premium, and we both win here, right? Your house isn't going to get
Wow.
damaged. We aren't going to have a claim to
Uh-huh.
pay out.
Yeah.
And so there's some cool stuff like that with just proactive building the customer relationship and being thoughtful that this enables as well.
Yeah. So your clients then are other insurance underwriters, right? Yeah. So they're using it both to underwrite new policies as well as do renewals and whatever the case might be. So,
Claims, inspections.
okay, gotcha. So in terms of how you engage with them and really your revenue model, this is an ongoing engagement, so either a contract or subscription basis with them to where
Exactly.
you're going to provide this data back to them. And is there a transactional component to this, or is this pretty much more about licensing?
So both. So we have a number of ways that people can interact with those services. So
Okay.
we expose it via an API that people often will pull into their existing business workflows, so they can just bring that in, whether it's underwriting or claims or renewals, to automatically show that information to a person in the moment.
Hmm.
And we also do batches for people that are looking at bigger picture things like what is my risk across my entire portfolio,
Yep.
where they'll send us somewhere between 1 and 12 million addresses, and we'll just run those and give them back a file that they can work with.
Hmm.
And then as well as we're getting into some more front end app work where we're helping people to visualize our data with their data, to really make better decisions like, do we need to send a inspector physically to this property, or can we determine enough about the state of it from the data we have to make a decision, which allows them to save money, and in the world of COVID allows you, the homeowner, to maybe not have another person in your house that you don't want there.
Yeah.
So that's the different ways it comes out, and yeah.
So is it more common that that through these contracts it's like unlimited usage, or is it pay per time you make an API call, or send
Yeah.
us a batch?
So usually it's per property.
Okay.
So the API is set up. You can send us a property on demand. We will go out and find the most recent imagery that's available through our imagery partnerships to make sure that we're getting you right. One of the key things here is a lot of the information they've had to work with in the past can be years, if not decades old, because you're looking at county assessor records and things like that and trusting when they updated the last thing about that house. Whereas we're able to tell you this is an image from a month ago or 2 months ago, and you're using very current data. Or if you're trying to look back in time, say before a claim or before a disaster, we can tell you, we found an image that is 2 months before the date you asked us to look before.
Yeah.
Right, and all that can happen on demand in a matter of seconds for people that need that front. But then also, right, can drive the same thing, whether it's, I want to look at this whole neighborhood or this whole area of my portfolio, or I want to go in and actually look at the property because I'm on the phone with somebody who's making a claim and I'm trying to look and see what's there and determine if I need to send an inspector or an adjuster out. Or I'm doing a renewal and I want to check and see, did you add a pool that we need to talk about because that adds significant risk from an insurance perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Heard a lot of stories from other families who have been like, yeah, we got our insurance policy, and then we went and did got put in the pool.
It happens.
Yeah.
More than you would think. Yeah,
Yeah.
we had early customers who said to us, "Hey, we're not sure this data is so great. There's there's all these pools that we don't have on file." Like, all right, let's take a look back study, and we
Yep.
went and grabbed some historical imagery and pulled it up and did a little report for them. It's like, oh, it turns out you were insuring a whole bunch of properties with pools, and just no one had
Yeah.
shared that with you.
Right. Right. Yeah. Very interesting. On the claim side, I mean, do you see a lot of activity post-disaster, wildfire, hurricane, something like that, just so that they can get a gauge on, what's our exposure here?
Yeah, absolutely. And so exposure is a big part of it, but also one of the things that they're very interested in that we're focused on right now is we sort of call it triage, right? So after something comes through, you can't help everybody all at once, right?
Hmm.
There's just not enough people at the company versus people that they insure. So, let's say a hurricane came through and some people had to put a tarp over the roof, but other people have had the entire roof ripped off and their house is totally uninhabitable, right?
Sure.
You want
Yeah.
to go to those people first. That's going to create a better customer experience
Yeah.
and, make things work better. So that, as well as also being able to weed out, unfortunately, there's a lot of fraud in this world too, and
Sure.
making sure that those people that are making fraudulent claims are easy to weed out, so that they aren't taking away resources from people with legitimate claims that really have work that needs to be done to get back to normal.
Yeah. So being a startup that started in 2019 and then COVID hit. Now you said you were a fully remote company, and so it sounds like you already had that under control. But I
Well,
mean, what did that do to the business?
so in 2019, our plan was to be a Chicago-based corporation with a nice office downtown, and have everybody based there. I was living in Chicago at the time, and we were getting ready to sign a new lease, and the COVID situation is unfolding in February, and our CEO woke up one night and said, "I'm just not comfortable signing this lease right now."
Yeah.
And sure enough, 2 weeks later, we were telling everybody to go work from home,
Hmm.
and nobody knew what was going on. And we stopped and thought to ourselves, we can look at this as a big downer that we're not going to get to do things the way we wanted to, or we can look at what new opportunities does this give us that we didn't have before, which was let's go more remote and hire people in other markets where we know and have networks of talent that we can pull to help us do this. So we started expanding. We've grown significantly in the the Boulder, Denver area, and the Dallas, Austin region,
Okay.
where a number of us in the company have strong networks and connections that we're able to pull on. But then we've also started to pull people in other parts of the country when it's the right fit for the job.
Hmm.
So I'm starting to have a small team of engineers in Northern Virginia, who also came out of defense and intel backgrounds like myself and just
Right.
needed a break from that,
Yeah.
as well as a growing team in Munich, Germany, where we're getting closer to a lot of the big insurance industry and agencies that are there, and being able to take advantage of that. So yeah, right. One opportunity went away, a new one opened, and we've just gone all in on it. So
Yeah.
now we
We,
don't have any physical offices. We've got people all over the world, and we've made it work. And I'd
yeah.
say we're better for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've all had to adapt.
Yeah.
Would you say your geographical preferences? I mean, you said you had to adjust because of COVID and now the market that we're in, right? There's just
Yeah.
it's harder to find talent than it's ever been. Are you still trying to stay within those centers, or now it's, hey, we just trying to find the right person regardless of where they're at?
Yeah, so absolutely. Right now, we view Chicago, Boulder, Denver, Dallas, Austin as sort of our gravity points,
Okay.
and then Munich for the EU, where we do expect to have increased growth in the future. And then we've expanded last year into Australia and New Zealand, and so we'll be shortly setting up. We haven't decided what city, but yes, we are trying to pick certain cities that we gravitate towards, on the thought that maybe we'll have offices again. We have lots of employees who would love to be back in an office. We have other employees that don't care. So we want to make sure we can create something that works for all of those people. And having some centers of gravity is good around that. But I'll tell you, when the right person comes along, if they're not in one of those places, we're going to take the right person.
Yeah, yeah. You pretty much have to
Yeah,
now, right? You know, you can't just stick in one market and put that, those job requirements out there and expect that you're going to get, a bunch of good resumes. It's
it's
not the
crazy.
market we're in now.
Well,
Yeah.
Chicago was wildly competitive, right? LinkedIn and Facebook and Google and Uber all have huge presences there,
Yeah.
and they can pay a lot more than a Series A startup could.
Yeah.
Um, so it was tough, and we would lose good people to just, hey, I can make $300,000 a year over here. I'm going to go do that,
Yeah.
which you can't argue with. So
Right.
yeah, opening that aperture has been huge, and particularly for us, what we're doing with bringing machine learning and geospatial data and all of that together, being able to tap into some of these different markets where those things are really strong in Texas and Colorado and Chicago, some people in California and back east, has really allowed us to form an amazing team in a very short amount of time, vice what it probably would have taken to do that in a single city.
Well, we've talked mostly about using this data for residential underwriting purposes. What's next for you guys? I mean, I assume commercial is an opportunity there, but this competency that you guys built seems like there's a lot of opportunity for other applications as well.
Absolutely. So, yeah, commercial is a perfect example. That's something we're very focused on right now. We have a great team, part of our Munich team, that is leading that effort and figuring out what that product is going to look like. And we hope to
Mhm.
start bringing that to market with a few early stage customers next year. It turns out commercial is wildly different from residential. So lots of fun new models we're going to get to build, and new data sets that we're bringing to bear beyond visible band imagery that are going to be exciting. Starting to look at things like synthetic aperture radar, hyperspectral imagery, thermal data, that all give different perspectives and are pretty exciting. And then, also branching more into that space around pre and post catastrophe, whether it's getting more on the predictive side of understanding what the risk is that's potentially coming, and then if it happens, being able to respond more effectively. Great for the insurance companies, but that one also obviously has some opportunities where, in the future, we hope we may be able to spin that out to more groups like FEMA and DHS, who could potentially take advantage of those kinds of things. But today, the focus is hardcore on the insurance industry. Those are the folks we know, and we know how to solve their problems.
Right.
That keeps us happy and focused, and it's very easy to get distracted in this space.
Yeah.
We come up with lots of ideas that we don't pursue. Uh,
Yeah.
they go in the
Uh-huh.
parking lot. Yeah, so definitely some opportunities down the road. I think the earlier ones will be, verticals that are closer to insurance, like mortgage lending and financial investments in real estate and things of that nature, where people are still very interested in understanding the risk around what that investment is.
I mean, in terms of why startups fail, a big reason that's often overlooked is too many opportunities, right? You come up with a lot of these ideas and you're like, yeah, that sounds great, or gosh, we can make a lot of money over there, or whatever. But, making sure that you're starting with a good foundation and focused on that before you start pursuing the next thing. I mean, that sort of discipline you got to have, but it's very important when you're in the early stages, right?
It is huge, and we actually have a great graphic that we pass around inside the company that one of our lead software engineers brought up. That it's a bubble with the team and 40 arrows going out of it, and they're short. And then you have the same bubble with one arrow going out of it and it's long, right? It's, how much focus do you have, right? And you can't, if you take on too much at once, you're just going to incrementally sort of swirl versus truly being focused on what those things are and being able to make real movements that are obvious value to customers, and allow us to build the next thing. That's been huge. And yeah, like you said, we definitely we come up with all sorts of ideas that I think lots of us would love to pursue, but they aren't right for this business at this time. So we put those to the side, and it keeps us going and keeps us in line with our CEO's favorite saying, which is, we should do what we can be better than anyone else at. And if it's not that, why are we doing it? So
Yep, that's
it's
a
kept
good
us lean and mean.
policy across the board. Well, along those lines, when it comes to your tech stacks and, or I should say, components of your tech stack, how do you guys make decisions on, gosh, this is core to our business, we should go and build this, or yeah, let's go find a partner for that part?
Absolutely. Yeah. Some of those things are obvious, right? When I got here and it was only a few engineers, they're like, oh, we're building an API gateway. And I was like, yeah, no, we're just going to go buy one. There's a reason that's a multi-$100 million business.
Hmm.
There's others, right? When you're looking at other data sources and different analytic things that could come to the table that could add value, where luckily we have an amazing team. We have a chief strategy officer who has had a long career in both geospatial and the insurance market, who's able to look at those things, and then we can take a look at, who are the other people in this area we're looking at, what do they have, and right, is there a partnership opportunity? And sometimes we do that. We've been creating a number of partnerships recently with others to bring our data and their data together and drive better solutions for people. And sometimes, there's nothing there, or there's companies there that just aren't as far along as we can get. There was a decision recently where we farmed out some work to a few other people to see what would come out of it. And the results they were able to share with us were less compelling than the preliminary stuff we had already built ourselves. So that was easy for us to go, all right, we've got the right people and the right focus here. We can run with this and be ahead of the curve. But
So sometimes experimenting, like trying both and see which works out better.
absolutely. And just,
Yeah.
knowing these people in the industry, being able to talk to them, being able to understand exactly what the problem is that needs to be solved, and not overcomplicating that, which is another trap some people fall into in this space. So yeah.
Yeah. One other thing I was curious about when we were talking about security earlier, and you inherited some good security practices around your technology. You're gathering a lot of data that is about consumers' homes, right?
Yes.
Whether that's pictures and things like that. What are the concerns around regulation and just general consumer privacy so that, you guys don't end up with a
Yeah.
bad reputation? I mean, what are the considerations there? What are you guys having to deal with, and how do you deal with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think this is one of the reasons that I was asked to join the company. My background in intelligence and defense is very much around understanding those things and making sure that data is protected and not exploited in ways that are statutorily or regulatorily impermissible. And, I've discovered now insurance is just as well regulated as the Department of Defense, right? It's a very similar life cycle. And so what we have done, for them, those regulations relate to the fact that they are putting all that information together down to the consumer related to an address. We have made a decision to not ever cross that line of linking these addresses to people within our system.
Okay.
So we only provide things related to a bounding box, an address, a parcel. We don't ever bring that into the actual person. We let the insurance companies who have all the regulatory stuff in place to do that get into that PII space.
Gotcha.
And we work very hard to stay clear of that, but also to protect the data that we do have, because, as you point out, even then it could be misused, and make sure that it is properly locked down in a way that it's not going to get out to somebody who would use it for the wrong purposes.
Well, that's a fantastic approach. But so, in essence, that is saying we are concerned only with the inanimate parts of the property, right? What makes it, not the people part of it,
Yes.
and just detach ourselves from that entirely. Put that on the insurance, who have all of the mechanisms in place to
And have
handle
these
that, right?
relationships with the customer already, right? That's
Yeah,
their
right,
customers.
right.
Our
Yeah.
customer is the insurance companies and the agents working there.
Right. Well, and if you think about it, I think that's one of the big gripes that consumers have is I didn't know this company even had my data. Like I know my insurance company has my data, right? I have a relationship with them. But if I find out that there's this whole other company that's had my data all along and I don't know what they're doing with it, I think that's when consumers really get sideways about things. So, keeping it separate is, that's
Exactly.
the best way to go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kept things clean. You know, it it does mean not going down certain paths, but as we already talked about, we know the paths we want to go down and where we're going to focus. So
Yeah.
that's just part of our focus and how we keep ourselves on the right track.
Yeah. So does that mean you guys will always try to be B2B, or do you ever see there being a B2C play here?
Yeah, hard to say. There have been randomly at times discussions about that. Would a consumer want to know these things about their house?
Right.
Would a consumer pay a subscription each year to know, like, hey, if you cut these trees back, your insurance agent might lower your premium? Uh,
Right.
or hey, if you're living in a mountainous region, the fire load around your house is getting pretty significant compared to previous years, and maybe you want to look into that to lower your risk
Hmm.
of wildfire coming all the way into the property.
Yeah.
So yeah, not something that we have delved into quite yet, but yes, totally on our radar that there could be an opportunity there.
Yeah. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm just, my head swirling with, not just my property itself, but what's happening around me, right? There was a subdivision built over here, and now because of their grading, I'm at, flood risk or,
Mhm.
things like that. I mean, that's some
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
powerful data.
Well, one of the exciting things we get to see because we start looking, at these whole neighborhoods. You're asking about one property, but it also becomes interesting to know the property I'm interested in has a roof that looks pretty beat up and like it might not last another 10 years. And every other house around it has a brand new roof that looks really good condition, right? What does that tell you about what's going on and what you might be
Hmm.
stepping into? Um,
Sure. Yeah. Wow. Fascinating. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have tons of conversations about we could do this and we could do that, but
yeah.
I mean, got to
I,
keep yourself focused, right?
it's, one of the great things at this point in the life of the company, we haven't gotten into that corporate separation of, divisions too much yet. Obviously, we have it all laid out on paper, but we still operate a little more academically, where we get to put a bunch of smart people in a room and geek out and bring different perspectives to the table and ultimately come up with the best solution based on all those perspectives.
Mhm.
And not be worried about so and so's team competing with the other team. It's at the end of the day, all right, now that we've figured that out, how do we all shape to bring that together?
Right. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, first of all, Ben, appreciate everything that you've shared today. It sounds like a fascinating business, and I'll be very interested to stay tuned and see where things go. But if any of the listeners have questions for you that, maybe came up as they were listening today or want to learn more about Arturo, where can they go?
Yeah, you can go to Arturo.ai and visit our website and request a demo. And that will link you straight up with somebody who will get back to you and show you how some of these capabilities work and how they might relate to you. And we can start a conversation from there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it. Fascinating business, and appreciate your time.